beginning of it, only 11,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. And our DNA has not had time to change to suit that. We're still 40,000 years too soon for us to eat the sort of food that is now produced by food manufacturing. So it doesn't suit our DNA. What suits our DNA is what we had for hundreds of thousands of years before that, which was wild plants and wild animals and wild fish.
It's a whole different paradigm to think about it that way.
It is.
That we're impacting our DNA when we eat or drink.
But I have hundreds of people that have been on my system now for more than a quarter of a century. And that's a long time. And for the first 10 years, I sort of didn't really believe it. And then when it got 15 and 20 years, and it includes myself, I started to really believe it. When it got to 30-odd years, in my case, I absolutely know. I'm in my 70s now, and I can do one-arm push-ups. I am totally healthy. I don't get colds or flus or anything like that, nor do most of my clients. And some of them are very well-known celebrities and government people.
You're in incredible shape, though. You work out. You have a whole system for working out, which is in the new Power program.
Right.
I want to talk a little bit about aspirin, because a lot of people are told to take aspirin to prevent strokes, particularly women. Well,
the reason that a very small amount of aspirin may inhibit stroke is because of its effects on what are called prostaglandins. Now, prostaglandins come in two sort of types. I won't go into it in great detail. They are hormone-like substances there's one that you might call the housekeeping prostaglandins that control various things like, the amount of mucus production in the heart, that sort of thing. And then there are inducible prostaglandins, that is, ones that are a part of our response to stress. They're an immune reaction. So when you're taking something like acetylsalicylic acid, aspirin, you have to take a very small amount, otherwise you interfere with the housekeeping prostaglandins. That's why it's very small. But when it only sort of puts a tiny rein on the stress prostaglandins, then it does reduce inflammation in the heart.
That's interesting. And I don't think most of us know the details of that.
No,
and what you call a small amount of aspirin is what?
Baby aspirin, like about 80 to 100 milligrams of aspirin. A normal aspirin is 325 milligrams.
Got it. Why is there such a big thing about nitrous oxide?
Well, nitrous oxide is a very important system in the body, and there are two types. One is the housekeeping, and the other one's inducible. One is takes care of, for instance, the diameter of your blood vessels. So it increases blood flow, and then the inducible does the same thing, but it's a response to stress. It's part of our fight-flight reaction. If you induce too much of it, then you damage everything. So that's why it's a balanced system. And I would not take things that induce nitric oxide. That is the basis, of course, of Viagra, Cialis, and all those other drugs for the males because they increase blood flow.
There's got to be another way, though, for them to do that.
I think
Give them some turmeric and some ginger. Let's talk about the spices. I noticed that you had a whole piece on the different spices: turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and capsaicin.
From peppers, hot peppers.
So you say there's no capsaicin in peppers. Why?
Not in the ordinary red, green, and yellow peppers you get at the grocery store. No, because it's been bred out of them. They have none left in them. The cultivars they're grown from have no longer any capsaicin in them. Only hot peppers have capsaicin.
And how much do you take, doctor?
I don't take it as an amount. We tend to eat spicy foods. And we use pepper on pretty much everything. We use cayenne, and we use hot peppers. And, of course, curry spices and things that come in powder.
You did a whole piece in your book, Save the Brain, on the calorie myth. I want you to share a little bit about that. I think that'll really awaken some people who are counting calories.
Well, calories are something that are taught to school children because you can take a piece of anything, a piece of cloth, a piece of wood, a piece of food, and you can burn it in a little instrument called a calorimeter. And when you burn it, it produces a certain amount of heat, and that's how you measure calories. And it is a rough analogy of what happens in the body. When you eat food, it produces a certain amount of heat. That's the energy it will produce. It keeps the body warm, for example. But the body doesn't work like that because the body is not a calorimeter. The body is actually a nuclear fusion plant. And what it works by is the transfer of hydrogen ions from one place to another. And that is completely different from what happens in the calorimeter. So it's a very rough analogy, but people grow up from school and they still think in terms of food and calories. And that's why calories are on the food labels, because it's what the public understands. But it's really got nothing to do with the way the body produces energy.
So give an example of, in the new paradigm, how we would look at it in terms of energy burning.
The best way is to look at the way that we developed, the way that we evolved. And the foods that are best for us and produce the most energy and the most clean energy, which is really important, are the foods of the hunter-gatherer diet. And we come back to it again. Fruits, vegetables, fresh vegetables, preferably organic because they don't have any pesticides and other things on them, and wild fish and wild meats, or grass-fed meats is the best most people can get.
But what about the protein myth that we were cave people and we're supposed to eat meat and that's what the body really wants?
Oh, right.
What about that?
Well, there were several waves of people that came out of Africa. The first wave that came out were not hugely long after we came down from the trees. And we came down from the trees not because we chose to do so, but because the trees ceased to exist. The Africa became actually frozen, and then it became open plains. So we had no choice. The people that survived had to survive on meat, and they became carnivores. The first wave out of Africa were carnivores, pure and simple. But then, of course, the vegetation recovered somewhat, not a lot, but somewhat. So people started to eat a lot of vegetation. And their genes changed over probably 1 million years. And the next wave that came out was more of a mixed diet type of people. And their DNA reflected that. So when you say that we were cave dwellers and we ate meat, yes, we did. And we still have that tendency. But by the time the descendants of most, say, modern European peoples and Americans came out of Africa, we were mixed diet foragers.
You've been a long-standing proponent of microfiltered whey protein.
Yes.
And in one of your books that I read on the right protein, you talked about how microfiltered whey protein is close to being bioidentical as possible or easily absorbable by the body.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm saying it wrong.
That's correct.
How come that is?
We don't know. We don't know. Because cow's milk is only good for baby cows. It's not good for anything else. And there are no animals that drink milk after weaning except ones that we teach to drink milk, like cats. So the very tiny proportion of whey protein in milk just happens to have the chemical formula